It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity.
Hello, model citizens. Welcome to, I forgot the name of the show. Welcome to Humanity Junction. Tonight on Trains and Tech, we're going to take a little meandering journey through a couple of things that have happened over the last week. If you guys were here last week, you'll remember that I was talking about my computer overheating. I think I've learned something this week, though. The CPU temperatures were at like 46% when I only have 2 monitors connected. When I have 4 monitors connected, it goes up to 80%. I don't understand why it affects the CPU, not the GPU, but, you know, we'll see how it goes. A couple things from last week that I'll mention just because Grandpa Rails wasn't here last week, so just to show him one more time, I did get 2 cars from Grandpa Rails from his railroad in the color orange, and if you know Grandpa Rails, I wouldn't expect anything but the color orange. I got this hopper here and this gondola as well. I do need to just pop some wheels on it, but that will be easy enough. So that was one thing, and then I do still have the HO scale boxcar here on the bench next to the N scale one, and they look really good. They look really good. I've never had 10. I've had up to 6 at one point. Never have 10. Right now, pretty much my setup for streaming is 4. But on the day-to-day, 2 of those monitors switch over and are used for work. And then one of them I keep in the background, and I will put things on and, you know, watch that YouTube stuff or whatever. Paul, I didn't change scales yet, but I do appreciate that people are making Human City Junction Riverside transfer cars in multiple scales. As people know, I've got a little bit of a problem. if you've been around for a little while, you know that I have a lot of 40-foot boxcars. That's primarily what I'm running on my layout. And I've got a lot of them. I probably have about 150 or so of just freight cars, not including any of the circus stuff. The layout probably only holds 100 or less, so I don't know what I'm doing with those other 50. So on top of that, I've decided to get 4 more micro trains. Had these, I think I got them for like a pretty good discount or something, if I remember correctly. I don't really remember. I'm not sure why I got Pacific Fruit Express, because I'm on the East Coast. I don't know. I don't think these would have ever run on the, but I don't know. They were express refrigerator cars, and I'm into express stuff, right? If you can't tell from the paint scheme of this, that's modeled after the Pacemaker paint scheme. I'm into anything kind of express, so this is one of their little 4-pack reefer sets. I like the dark colors. I like, they just look great. I think they're neat. Built in 1936, so, you know, more 40-foot reefers. How many boxcars do you plan to use for operations? I think like 80-ish. I'm not 100% sure yet. I'm still kind of working out some of those details, but I do think I've got 2 interchange areas, right? I got the north staging tracks that hold whatever, like 8x6s. What is that, 50, 54? No, 54. I don't know. No, that's wrong. Boy, I can't even think tonight. And then I've got a car float on the other end that holds 8 cars. So between those, it gives me ways to interchange cars on and off the layout. So I think 48, yeah. I know it was like 8 times 5 was 40, and I don't know where I got to 54. But anyway, 48's the right number. So just alone, you know, there can be basically 50 cars back in this area right here, and they can be pulled in and out, and, you know. Yeah, so more 40-foot cars, just I don't know why. I really don't know why. So why don't we get into the excitement from the weekend and get into the thumbnail for tonight's stream. I am going very quickly tonight. We'll see if this stream even lasts an hour. Worst case scenario, I don't know. We'll do a Q&A or something, but Heath is a lightweight. I've given away more cars than this. Yeah, I know. Bill, the counts that I just gave, the like 100 or so cars on the layout, doesn't count any of the circus stuff. The circus stuff is all still in the cases along the back wall. This layout, I just decided I didn't have the space to do a circus scene right. So the circus scene is going to be when I finally get the opportunity to expand this layout, which I'm hoping at some point I will be able to expand this story a little bit more, and I'll build out a town upstate, and that small little town upstate in the late 60s, early 70s will have the circus come to town, and it'll be part of the operations of the layout. But for now, no circus. I mean, I might run some stuff just for fun, but in general, no. Okay, so what happened this weekend? I wasn't even sure that I was going to get to go. I wasn't feeling well on Friday. Saturday rolled around. I was kind of contemplating, like, should I cancel, should I not? Ended up going, had a really good time. I went out to the West Island Model Railroad Club. I've got a 360 video on my channel from their layout if you want to kind of get a bigger view of it. But what I want to talk about today is specifically the ops that I participated in on Sunday. And I guess it's kind of the downside of operations, and other people can relate to this as well, but every time I go to an op session, I start thinking about like how I would change my layout. And I'm like, I've barely even gotten started with the layout, and I'm just overly influenced by outside sources. But you know, I guess that's all part of it. The other thing that happened that I've mentioned is that when I go to op sessions, I always forget to take photos. So I took like 5 photos and made a slideshow of like 13 out of the 5 photos just because I'm terrible at, I don't know, I forget to take photos. Mike, if I put a hole in the wall, I think they would throw me through the hole in the wall. So I think at least for now, I will keep it to this room, and we'll stick with that for a little while. So West Island Model Railroad Club, that's where I was. I've talked about them before. They're a local club out in Hicksville, New York. Ed O'Connell, who was here actually last week, mentioned he was going. So I reached out and I said, hey, like, you know, would it be okay if I showed up? They actually had a full contingent of operators, had about 40 people there. That layout takes 40, 50 people to run the layout. So it's always a lot of fun when a lot of people show up to operate on the layout. And I was lucky enough that I was able to get a job that I've been trying to get for the last 2 times, I guess, that I've been there. And I was finally able to get it, which was the Greenville drill. So the Greenville drill works under the Greenville Yardmaster, and Greenville is the car float that's on their layout. So I got to drill the car float. I think I've shown a similar picture to this, but they've got, the car float doesn't actually leave and enter the dock. So when the car float isn't there, they just put up this little sign blocking off the car float that says no car float at dock. You know, it's just a little bit of an operational detail. Mark, I didn't know, were you over at Dave's doing some ops? I really wanted to do the car float thing because of the car float I have on my layout. The car float on my layout was the last thing that kind of got integrated into it. It is now operational, meaning like I can actually run a train all the way out to it. But I'm still, as with everything on my layout, kind of figuring out the operations of it. I've worked one other car float, and that was Vince Lee's Erie 28th Street. Learned a lot. That was a small switching layout, about 8 feet by 2 feet, and similar operations to this car float at the club, but just really kind of a different experience, even though it was a similar experience. All right. I don't know where the terms come from in railroading, so I'm not completely sure where the term drill comes from, but what you do as the drill engineer, essentially, is you drive the locomotive that does the classification in the yard. So you pull the cars off the arrival departure track, you sort them in the yard, you pull them out of the yard, you drop them on the float lead, you work with the Greenville Yardmaster to make sure that we're loading and unloading the car float. So I don't know where it comes from, but I'm curious if anybody knows. I never thought to look it up. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I know Mark has gone over to Dave Co's a couple of times. 3 hours is definitely a good session length. What did we do? I think we did about 3 hours at the West Island Club as well. There are a couple layouts that I've been to that'll do like 4 and even 5 hour op sessions just to run some more trains. It definitely gets tiring. You're definitely doing a lot of thinking. This is one of the photos. I heard the term drill track, but assumed, yeah, so the drill track is basically the yard lead. It's where the drill engine will run back and forth as you're sorting cars in the yard. So, yeah. Trackside Mike said, our op sessions are 8 to 10 hours. I want to see one of those on video, Mike. You gotta do a live stream from there, because I don't know. That's pretty tough. Yeah, Dennis. I am things have slowed down with op sessions. They usually do in the summer, and I am just, yeah, I'm missing it a little bit as well. I've been fairly fortunate that I've got to go at least once a month, but if I can go every week, I'd love to do it. Here's the car float that they have. It's a 3-track car float. I am going to zoom into this picture, or maybe the next picture. I'm going to zoom into one of these pictures, and oh, did I mess it up? No, I don't know. I don't think. Okay, so here it is zoomed in. Okay, so you can see that the stuff in the background is out of focus. Again, I didn't take a lot of photos, so I kind of messed up. So I apologize that this photo is out of focus, but we'll just kind of have to deal with this for now. And I'm going to kind of use this because, of course, I forgot to take a picture of the track plan as well. Yeah, I guess that's what drilling means. Yeah, you're sorting cars, essentially. So we can talk through it here. Let's talk through this a little bit. So the switches are basically all at the far end of this picture. And all the switching that I was doing was at the other end of what this picture was taken. The arrival departure tracks were these 2 tracks right here on the side. And essentially what would happen is Allentown would send a train out to Greenville. Greenville was on a branch line, so this was the end of the branch. So they would pull in one set of cars. We would then lash their locomotives up to the departure set of cars, and they would take those cars back to Allentown. So, we get a string of 20 cars, we'd send out a string of 20 cars. And those would come in on the right side here, which was the arrival departure tracks. The classification tracks were these 3 tracks just to the inside, basically, of everything right there. So you would take the arrivals and departures and you would classify them. The floats went to 4 different areas. So one of the floats went to Long Island, one of the floats went to Bay Ridge, one went to BEDT, and one went to Long Island, I think it was. You had 3 classification tracks and the float leads. So you would use the 3 classification tracks for the future floats that were coming, and you would just put, the one that was going out next, you would put on the float leads. So the float lead, basically, right here, it was at the edge of the benchwork, obviously. This is really where I started realizing, I wouldn't say I screwed up. I wouldn't say that. I was saying, though, that there was some operational ability, if that's a word, of the way these float lead tracks were set up, that I think if I could find a way to maybe add a tiny bit of this into mine, I don't know that I really have enough length. I guess that was part of the problem as well. They had a 3-track float. They could take up to between 12 to 14 cars. Mine only takes 8 cars, so I don't need quite as much space as they do, but you know. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Trains come in on the arrival departure track, get classified, go out on the float. Cars then come in on the float, a different set of cars, and I'll show how they did that. Cars come in off the float and they go right to the departure track. So cars that were coming off the float did not get classified. They go right to the departure track and get brought right to Allentown. So the only thing that you're classifying is stuff that's coming in from Allentown. Bobby's asking, were there operating instructions to prohibit overweighting the barge or consider ballasting? That is a very appropriate question I will get to in 2 slides, I think. Give me 1 second and I will answer that. So how did we know what floats were running and what to do? Well, they had a schedule. This was the car float sailing schedule from Greenville, New Jersey. This kind of explained how it worked. There were the 5 steps at the top of the sheet there that if you can read them, great. At the beginning, there was a train, or there was a float every 15 minutes. So you had to pull cars off the float. You had to load new cars onto the float. You had to basically keep that going for every 15 minutes for the first little bit. Then it slowed down a little bit, got to every half hour, and then at the end of the session again, it went down to every 15 minutes. So the cars are removed from the float consistently. So what they do, and let me read one thing, and then I'll show the next picture. Yes, so this is real time. So the operating session starts at 12 noon, actual time 12 noon. So the first float is already in the dock with cars on it, ready to be pulled off at noon. You pull those cars off the float, you push on. This is the Bay Ridge cars. You push on the Bay Ridge cars, and then that float goes away, and the next one comes in at 12:15. How do you swap out all of these floats within an op session? Well, this is how you do it. Drawers. And I don't mean the kind that you wear on your body. They are the plastic ones, and the same ones I actually have a lot of as well. And what you do, so you're not uncoupling any of the cars on the float. Essentially, the cars go onto the float as, you know, like a block of cars. So you're not really you're not moving cars around on the float, really. They just kind of get pushed onto the float and then go away. So when you load a float up with cars to go to Bay Ridge, you open up one of these empty drawers, you put all of the cars that go to Bay Ridge into one of these empty drawers, and then you check your schedule again, and you say, okay, the next one is coming in from Bay Ridge, or the next one's coming in from Long Island City, or wherever the next one is coming in from, and then you go to that drawer, or you go to, you know, one of the drawers that's full, and you pull the cars out of the full drawer and put them on the car float. So you are, I guess it's like an active fiddle yard is I know what the UK people would call it. It's active staging. It's kind of like cassettes and drawer style. I was thinking at one point that I was actually going to have just multiple car floats, and each car float would already be loaded with cars. But then people said, like, yeah, try carrying around a car float loaded with 8 cars. I mean, those things just roll all over the place. It's just an absolute mess. It just doesn't work. To the best of my knowledge, they only use that one schedule. The way the schedule changes, though, is kind of in the numbers of the cars and the different cars you're pulling on and off. The cars, they use a car card style system, so it kind of goes around in circles. I don't know. I mean, it is a club. They have a huge amount of rolling stock. No rerailers. It's HO scale, so pretty easy to to put things on the track. I do want to read one thing though here. So I'm reading this bottom sentence here on the bottom. Operational hint. If it has 20 cars, it runs. If it has 5 cars, it still runs. If it has no cars, it still runs. Meaning, you may have a car float that doesn't have any cars. That car float still goes. You may have a car float that's only half loaded. That car float still goes on this schedule, regardless of how many cars actually go out. So that's kind of one of the things that keeps it variable, depending on what cars you're getting out of Allentown. You may have a car float with 12 cars, and you may have a car float with 2 cars. If a car float has no cars, does it still float? I think it does. I think it actually floats higher in the water. Yeah, if we go back to the very first photo, you can see, oh, right there. Yep, so they got the tugboat lashed up. Obviously, it's the same tugboat the whole time. You don't swap the tugboat out, but yeah, they do have a tugboat in there as well. So there were some questions about loading it and switching the cars and how does it work and all that kind of stuff. Well, there was a method that you needed to follow to unload cars as well as load cars. And there were 2 8.5 by 11 sheets hanging up at the top. The reason for this unloading and loading method is that if you do not load it this way, you will flip your float. Well, you don't flip your float. You'll tip the cars off the float. So you pull half the cars off of one outside track, then you pull all the cars off the other outside track, then you pull the second half of the cars off the other outside track, then you pull out the center track, and you do exactly the opposite to load it. And you do that so they don't flip. So that's part of the operational game that you're playing, is that you are loading and unloading. So Bob B says, it sounds like a loss of revenue with no cars loaded. It definitely is, but they are making revenue on the floats coming in. So the floats coming in are pretty much always full. It's the floats going out sometimes that aren't always full. Sometimes they are, but yeah, at the end of the day, they wouldn't make any money if the car float didn't run at all. And because the dock, there's multiple, if we look at the schedule, or we can look at this picture here, right? There's 4 different companies essentially, or 4 different locations that the floats run to. So if you have a Long Island City float and there's no cars, you can't just like sit there and wait for cars. You gotta kind of, get out of the way. Mark says, makes me want to add a float. Time for a second level. Agree. Do it up. Any historical records of flip float? I used the wrong term. I don't think any of them ever flipped. I think it would be very hard to flip to flip the whole float. But I am sure there are photos online of boxcars sitting in the water off the side of a car float that got tipped over by accident. But obviously you had the regular dock workers, so they hopefully kind of knew what they were doing and hopefully kind of kept things in line. But I guess this kind of takes us to this thing of like, okay, how did what did I mess up, or what do I think I want to do differently? For the uneducated, will the cars float? No, the boxcars have a big open cavity in the center of them with big metal wheels on the bottom. They definitely Definitely would not float. They would definitely sink. I don't know if there's counterweights on the float or not. That's an interesting question. But I mean, they're essentially like, if you see a trash barge out on the water, like it's essentially a trash barge, right? It's a very low, flat barge. It doesn't have a huge what's it called, a draft? No, is that the right word? Whatever it's called, the keel when it goes into the water, the depth determined, I don't know. Anyway, very confused. All right, so how did I mess up? Well, I decided to open up AnyRail, and it's been a long time since I opened up AnyRail, and what I didn't know is AnyRail actually has a new version. If I go down here, this is version 7 of AnyRail. This is the first time I've ever opened version 7. I think they're up to like 7.0. I don't know how to look up the version. Oh, maybe here. File, help? Be under help? No, info? I don't remember what it is, but I think it's like 7.022 or something like that. So if you have AnyRail and you haven't opened it up in a while, open it up. They've got some new stuff in there. I think you can say flat bottom. I think so. Andrew L says, I'm playing with AnyRail right now. I noticed that when I tried to open something newer on an older version at home. Yeah, there you go. So this is the new version. I'm still kind of figuring some stuff out, but if you don't know, the car float is this area over here on the side. I probably shouldn't have made it bigger because that kind of messed things up. But this is my car float area. This back covered area here is another staging area. So it's not really a part of the car float in any way. It's just a place for cars coming from the north that go to the south that need a place to go, essentially. So the car float is here. And if you noticed in the images, one of the things about the images that maybe you can kind of see here, they have a double crossover right at the end of the float. What that allows them to do is basically take the cars from one side to the other side right off the end of the float. And if you look what I did, my only turnout is way back here. And I didn't really think about, I thought a little bit about loading, but I didn't necessarily think about it enough. So this track here on the car float itself is about 15 inches. If you keep cars on the transfer bridge and go up to here, that is another 15 inches. So there is enough room to like pull the cars straight out and then be able to pull the other cars out. I don't really have enough room here in this corner though, to make up the train as one long train, without ending up, coming over into this yard here. My classification yard is here. Essentially, this is where the cars will be classified and then pulled over when they need to go into the car float. This is the yard lead, which can either be used to drop a set of cars, to run around them, to then pick them up from the other side to push them in. I don't know, like I'm looking at it and it's a little wonky. And yeah, I do get it. I know it's not wrong. It's just a little, weird, I guess. I do kind of have, Bob says, could you tie the yard lead in with south staging? It is kind of tied in. This track here does cross over from the yard lead out, so that you can get locomotives and stuff out from you know, if you pull in forward here, you can get them out there. You could also run around up here as well. I think it'll work okay-ish, but I don't know. Let's see if we go over here. Let me see if I can get this light on without knocking everything over. And that light is just not bright enough. All right, hold on. Let me do this. All right, so we got things brighter now. This should be a little better. So here's the actual car float. You can see, so the switches here, my fouling point, or not fouling point. I did a whole thing on this. Whatever that's called, where the cars will hit the other track, is right about here. So I can take the full cut of cars and get them off the float. They are still kind of a little, you know, on the transfer bridge, which isn't ideal. Ideally, it would have been better, I think, if this switch was back further that way. And then if I put a crossover or something right here. So I'm not really sure. I don't know. I mean, it works. I do kind of think, though, you know, if I did if I had a crossover here and if I had put this back here, this is a tight curve too. This is one of the tightest curves on the layout. This is an 11-inch curve. This is one of the reasons that I'm sticking with 4-axle locomotives and 40-foot boxcars is because of this 11-inch radius here. Yes, in N scale, pretty much everything will run on an 11-inch radius, but it fits the era and everything. So if this switch was back here further, and then I had 2 tracks running all the way down with a crossover here, that probably would have given me a little bit more prototypical operations, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Let's see what's Paul saying. Sometimes those double crossovers can be more trouble than they're worth. Not the most reliable. Fouling point works. That's what we call them. Sounds good. Yeah, I am not gonna be making my own turnouts. That is for sure. What I was thinking that I might do, and the problem is just that the length it's gonna take up kind of makes it almost purposeless, useless. I wouldn't put a double crossover in. I would probably just put a single crossover in. So you would always kind of have to come in on one track to be able to escape out the other track. I don't think I would go to a double. I mean, one, for the money of it too, right? Like, you know, having less turnouts definitely reduces the cost. So I don't know. I guess that's just kind of one of those downsides, I guess, a little bit of one of the downsides of going to an op session and learning how other people do their car floats. This one was a little bit based on hold on a second. This one was a little bit based more on Vince Lee's Erie 28th Street, where everything kind of comes off the float and goes over to either the yard or the freight house or whatever. So that's kind of what, you know, that's kind of what I'm duplicating here is there's a freight terminal, there's a team track, small little classification yard here, passing siding. Passing siding essentially would be your arrival departure tracks. So I think there's some operations to that'll work. I just got to figure it out. I got to figure out how it works in the grand scheme of the rest of the layout as well. One of the things that we learned is, you know, no matter how big the room is, right, everyone's going to always end up standing in the same spot. So I have a lot of switching opportunities down in this part of the layout. So how do I run things in this area without everybody standing on top of each other? How do I keep somebody over on this side classifying or whatever and not? So I gotta figure it out. Bob B says move the ramp to the right to allow more space for spotting 4 cars before the fouling point. Yeah, I did think of moving this a little bit, but the now if I can't find the camera, I wanted to leave, just from a visual point of view, I wanted to leave some space around the car float. This is actually further this way than I had initially planned. I had initially planned it to be much farther that way, and I did end up already moving it down. But if I come over here to the end, I did want to leave myself, I did just want to leave myself, some space around it as well. You'll notice it does kind of look like it's floating. It does actually rock as well. I've got it up on it's up on a single pivot. N scale cars aren't going to be heavy enough to tip it over or anything like that. But it was just kind of once I end up pouring the water and stuff, I don't know that that'll stay or not. Yeah. I definitely don't want to build them. What if you move the Y closer to the float in the transfer bridge so you had a longer lead? The problem with moving the crossover, the turnout that is there closer down, is that the way you want to pull these cars off is you want to pull off 2 cars here, then you would pull off all of these cars, then you would pull off the rest of these cars. Like that's kind of how you have to unload it. I don't know how well that would work if I had the turnout closer, because you might end up getting yourself blocked in depending on the cars that you have. Yeah, the float that was at the that's at the, oh, let's go to this one. The frog is on the car float. The points are on the transfer bridge. So, yeah, I don't know that I know they put the frog on the car float. I've never seen the points on the car float. So, here the points are definitely on this transfer bridge. And yeah, Todd, so that would be the problem with moving that turnout, is that you do unload it like that as well. And I do, since you mentioned it, I do have a transfer caboose. This is the transfer caboose that I'm going to use. This was painted up by John Farrington for me. It's a Riverside transfer caboose. Let's see if I can do this without making Dennis completely dizzy. No, that didn't quite work. Well, you can kind of see it there. I'm probably going to use that as my idler car. It's not that long. I might end up using that with a flat car along with it, just to get a little extra reach. But yes, I do plan on using an idler car, just to keep the locomotives back off the transfer bridge. Yeah, so a lot of people talk about this. A lot of people say, like, oh, you can't put the locomotive on the barge. And while that's probably generally true, You can, if you load it correctly, you can put a locomotive on a barge. I mean, it's how they used to get the locomotives around, so it is possible. That said, I do know that the purpose of the idler cars is just to make it safer, right? The weight of a locomotive is significantly more than the weight of a boxcar, so just kind of having, just having a light car like this transfer caboose or a flat car just basically wouldn't affect the weight of it, so the engineer and the conductor didn't have to really think about the weight, whereas if they were using a locomotive, they'd constantly have to be thinking about the weight on it. So yeah, PRR used to send them to Norfolk across the Chesapeake Bay for service. So yeah, so they were effectively used to transport locomotives, but just not on a regular basis. And yeah, it does. It adds another step too, right? Because you have to then, as you're moving things around, as you're using your, your locomotive to, let's say you end up pulling the cars. If you end up pulling the cars here to run around them here, you have to make sure the idler car's in the right spot. The other thing I'm trying to figure out with operations is I kind of think that this area at minimum wants to be a 2 locomotive area, meaning that you would have a smaller switcher that's just pushing cars on and off the float, and then you would have another switcher over here doing the classification. So you could essentially pull a cut of cars here with one locomotive, and then have your locomotive for the car float just kind of duck in behind it, pull it back out, push it onto the float while the other one can then come out. So I think it's a multiple locomotive thing. I just don't know if it's 2 operators or 1 operator, or you're not going to make the barge on wheels so that you can move it around and make it look like a new barge is coming. No, I'm not. That is out there. There are people that have done that. I have decided, like the 2 layouts that I've operated on with car floats, that I will not have a moving car float. I will just manhandle the cars off as well. Funny you should mention that. Oh, I'm not going to be able to find it now. I've got piles of locomotives here. Let's see. Hey, and I found it. I did get a couple of these. I think I have 2 of them now. These Bachmann 44 tonners. They do have DCC. They don't have sound in them. I don't know how well they're going to run. The 6 axles on this layout run flawlessly. The 4 axles, not so much. So something even smaller, I don't know. But yeah, I would love it if I could get this running down here in this area. I would love that to be able to be used in a 44 tonner on there as well. Heath, question is, are you okay with people handling your cars? N scale is much more fragile. Replacing them on the car float. Yeah, I mean, it's this is model railroading. I built this for operations. Things are going to happen, right? I mean, most people have the utmost consideration for other people's layouts, and they will never intentionally do something. Obviously, I ask that, if something does happen, like, just let me know. But stuff happens. It's part of the operations game. It's part of the fun of it as well, though. I mean, you're gonna have to do some maintenance. So this is one of the functions of a transfer caboose. I do not know that they ever use transfer cabooses as either cars on floats, but what they did do, I have a photo of a flat car with a small shed on it. and the shed that was on the flat car was the essentially the toolbox for the train crew that worked the car float, and they used that flat car with the shed on it as their idler car. So that's a little bit the situation of that's a little bit that situation is I don't think they would actually use a transfer caboose. It's just what I was able to kind of get. Does the float take in consideration the tides? So I moved the camera over here so that you could see. So this section here is called the transfer bridge. If you notice, there's actually nothing under the transfer bridge. This transfer bridge is going to have a big gantry crane right here, and that crane will be able to raise and lower this transfer bridge. So depending on whether it's high tide or low tide or whatever tide it is, this edge of the transfer bridge can be raised or lowered to match the car float. And there are these little spots on the car float that they'd put these alignment pins in to lock everything into place before rolling things off the car float. So they did take that into consideration. Yeah, so the key is, right, if it's broken, pull the car card or whatever, you know, put the car aside. If you are going to steal a car at somebody's layout, make sure you also steal the car card. If you only steal the car, the layout owner will still have the car card and he will know it is missing. At least on my layout, I have so many box cars. If somebody did swipe a box car, as long as they took the car card, I probably wouldn't even know. Bob, I don't know the answer. That is a good question. I do know in all the pictures and stuff that I've seen, they do have, you know, bumpers on the one end of the car float. I would guess that they would put something on the other end. I don't know. Does anybody know? That's a good question. The caboose is too short to be used as an interim car, gondolas, or flatbeds. Yeah, I'll probably use it in conjunction with a flatbed, kind of as just a, you know, a little crew cab place for the crew to, you know, jump in, or where they could keep their tools or that kind of thing. I don't know how we got on Tide Pods or Tide with Bleach. Oh, because we're talking about the tides. Yeah. The transfer bridge that I have is from N-Scale Architect. It's one of the purchases from, what was it called? Amherst in January that I got. I'm waiting until I probably get a lot better building structures before I'm going to attempt to build it. But I'm going to kit bash it to look like the 69th Street transfer bridge, to look like this transfer bridge. So this is what basically is the inspiration for the layout, especially the inspiration for the car float, is this 69th Street transfer bridge. It's the only remaining transfer bridge on the west side of Manhattan that New York Central used to use up until, I think it was 1968. It's still there. It's completely falling down. 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, they did some work to basically preserve it so it didn't further fall down. But this is, you know, not too far from where I live, and kind of, you know, they say you model what you see. Yeah, so that it is true. Car float aprons have the not all car float aprons have the structure above the transfer bridge. Correct. Some of them actually just floated on like barrels or whatever. Some of them lifted in different ways. This 69th Street one did have the gantry over it, so that's my inspiration. Yeah, we'll talk about that. I'm not so sure about that. Next time I go to Sony, I'll have to take some photos because the old cranes where the barges used to come into are still there. I think that stuff's really cool. Down in Red Hook, too, if you go out to where IKEA is, all the cranes are still there. They don't use them for anything, but they've just kind of become this, you know, landscape on the waterfront, and I think they're really cool. I think they're really really interesting and something kind of. Oh, I hit the wrong button. Well, it'll come back. I meant to hit the thank you button. I hit both buttons. But yeah, so the problem with operation sessions, while I do love them, I also find that they make me think about changes, and then I start, you know, overthinking things, and you know, stuff happens. I don't think I'm going to change. I'm not going to change the arrangement right this moment, but what I'm thinking of is how can I utilize what I do have and set up an operations scheme that allows me the, you know, the most sort of prototypical methodology of, let's say, loading the car float. Like my layout is freelance, right? I mean, there is no Riverside transfer. There was no, you know, human city jet, right? I mean, this is, right, like this didn't exist, right? This is completely made up in my head. But the ideas of the layout and everything do come from the prototype. It's, you know, my story is just that 1968, New York Central closed down and my company came in and bought the track rights and, you know, bought a bunch of rolling stock and, you know, kept the car float and the yard and everything alive is for, you know, as long as they could keep making some more money. So it's freelance, it's fictional, it's mine, it's made up, but it is kind of, you know, based on reality. And Bob's right. I mean, it's where I'm at right now. I'm still so early in my operations journey, or at least I feel like I'm still early in my operations journey, that I don't understand certain things at a at like a high enough intellectual level that I can apply it to my layout. So that's kind of why I keep going to some of these other layouts with this open mind of not just doing the op session, but really trying to understand, like, why are the cars moving the way they are moving? Like somebody mentioned earlier, like, why would you run a car float with no cars? Like, you lose all that revenue. It's expensive to run the car float without any cars on it. So, like, why would that happen? And then how can I apply that to my own layout to, you know, make this sort of prototypical of a, you know, of a branch line of the larger system as well. Getting into the language a little bit, I know people talk about this all the time. You know, are you a prototypical modeler? Are you a freelance modeler? Are you proto-freelance or whatever? I've got my opinion on that as well. I used to say, oh, like, I'm doing proto-freelance. I mean, I'm not a prototypical modeler. I consider myself a freelance model railroader. Just because I am a freelance model railroader doesn't mean that I'm not a model railroader. And I think a model railroader bases their modeling off of the prototype. So even though I am a freelance model railroader, I don't think I have to say that I am proto-freelance. I think saying that you're a freelance model railroader is saying that you are a proto-freelance model railroader, because I don't think there is anything that's really just am I saying anything that makes sense at all? Because you Yeah, I don't know. Trains Lover, I do want a more intense ops session. I do like when the operators have to work together to solve a problem and not just, not just kind of be off on their own. I like collaborative gaming. I like the idea of having people in the room that have to work together to solve problems. So I do want there to be some sense of a tight schedule, but at least initially, I think things are going to be more sequence-based. So it's going to be, step 1 happens, then step 2 happens, and step 3 happens. I don't think I'm going to go to any sort of a timetable and train order type of scenario. I might do something where, like, every 20 minutes a car float comes in, and I'll just get a 20-minute timer, and whoever's operating the car float just needs to flip that timer every 20 minutes. But I don't think I'm going to do a sort of a rigid time schedule. By sequencing stuff, you can put stuff as close together or as far apart as your operators want. They can sort of set their own pace a little bit when it is when it's in a sequence and not set up on time. And yeah, I mean, I like the you want to get a certain number of trains run in a session, but the trains kind of just have to run in an order. They're going to run when they are, and yeah, I mean, just make it happen. That is true. Humans love to come up with names for things. Paul from Tierline says, I think it went away. I think proto freelance is really people who take a real life railroad and just bend it slightly. A full-on freelance creates their own railroad entirely. And so, okay, I'm gonna say this, and everyone's probably gonna leave because I feel like this is a little bit controversial, but I don't think there is any way to actually model. That's not true. If you do what Vince Lee did, and he modeled the Erie 28th Street, and all he did was an 8-foot by 2-foot section, you can get pretty close to prototypical. But even Vince took some liberties in his layout, and he eliminated one of the crane tracks. I think eliminated one of the freight house tracks or something as well. So basically what I'm saying is, people that say they're prototypical modelers, I mean, how can you be a prototypical modeler? Like, you are always making compromises, and you're always choosing what's important to you to tell the story. Yes, I mean, you can get really, really close to the prototype, but I think elements of your layout can be prototypical. I think you can make a prototypical boxcar. I think you can make a prototypical locomotive. I think maybe a section of your layout can be prototypical, but like being like 100% prototypical, I don't know how you do that as a model railroader. So I just say I'm freelance. I'm just having a good time. I'm just having fun. I'm going, hanging out with people, solving puzzles, playing games, doing as much fun as I can in this hobby, enjoying it, sharing it with other people. Hopefully people enjoy what I share with them, and I look forward to, people that have their own YouTube channels. I go and see what they're up to as well. So keep sharing, keep people loving this hobby. I mean, it's a great hobby. So from the city that never sleeps, farewell, model citizens.
It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity.